Hello people from all over the world, friends of the Arteciência channel. It's been quite a busy year, but here I am again. I'm Bruno Zalem, and I'm here to talk about my favorite subject, which is the development of consciousness, arts and science, and how human thought have evolved throughout the centuries. I have already recorded videos about this topic before, but this is the first time in English, which is quite a challenge. And every time I find new information, it's like matching a new piece in the puzzle, which makes the whole image clearer. So let's talk about it again. As a first attempt to describe reality, cultures created their myths, and they were transmitted orally throughout the generations until they were finally written down. These myths are a very rich source of ancestral knowledge. Among them are the greatest stories ever told. For Western knowledge, something changed around the 6th century before Common Era. Philosophy was created, and mythology was no longer the only way to describe phenomena. Although its true origin is lost in the mists of time, Thales is considered to be the first philosopher. Many followed him. The essence of nature was their ultimate search. These early philosophers triggered a revolution in consciousness that would culminate in science. They laid the foundations of our way of thinking. To explain the structure of matter, Democritus and Leucippus created the concept of atom, and Empedocles created the theory of the four elements. The Pythagoreans succeeded to relate the length of vibrating strings with the notes of the music scales. And from this, they created the first model of universe based on physical and mathematical laws. As it started, Earth was the center of the universe, and the planets orbited in spheres that followed the principles of music. Harmony of the spheres was how they called it. This is how human consciousness stopped understanding the world we're living in as a product of the divine mystery and started explaining it through universal physical laws. Socrates created a method to investigate beliefs and convictions, destroying them through questions that exposes mistakes and logical inconsistencies. Socratic logic teaches us to analyze our thinking and face a clearer perspective on what surrounds us. From this time on, the main work of a philosopher is not to understand objective physical laws, but the inner laws that govern thought. Socrates was accused of corrupting youth and not believing in the gods. He was sentenced to death by poisoning. He himself never wrote down his knowledge, but Plato, one of his disciples, recorded and continued his master's legacy. Plato taught about the world of ideas, an eternal, immutable and stable plan, opposed to the world of the senses, a world of appearances, and characterized by its mutability. Plato used the myth of the cave to illustrate the idea that what is in the sensible world is a shadow of what is in the ideal world. Plato had many disciples. Among them, the most prominent was Aristotle. Aristotle diverged from his master's thinking in some ways by giving less importance to the ideal world and maintaining the importance of experimentation in the search for truth. Aristotle kept special interest in empirical sciences, closely observing nature. He was tutor to Alexander of Macedonia, who would become the greatest emperor of ancient times. Greek philosophy spread through the regions conquered by the Macedonian Empire. During this period, knowledge was gathered in the library of Alexandria, and there followed some of the greatest achievements of ancient science. To name a few of them, Euclid laid the foundations of geometry in his work, The Elements. Archimedes recognized fundamental physical laws, and Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth. Somewhere around the 3rd century BC, Aristarchus of Samos proposed that the Earth was not the center of the universe. He tried to solve some of the inconsistencies in geocentric theory, but people at that time didn't believe that. And before the structures of geocentrism collapsed, Claudius Ptolemy tinkered the theory, and geocentrism kept being the official one. In the break of the 5th century of Common Era, Hypatia of Alexandria questioned again the Earth as a center of the universe and reached the same conclusion of Aristarchus. But it will take a millennium before this idea was threatened again. When Middle Ages began, Western culture lost interest in natural science, but branches of knowledge took root in Eastern cultures and bore fruit among them. Opening a parenthesis in this story, someone from a culture other than Western would tell this story from a different point of view. I am Brazilian, my mother tongue is Portuguese, and I'm presenting history from the point of view my heritage comes from. Humanity is one, and we share a common history from different perspectives. Closing the parenthesis and resuming story, after a millennium of Middle Ages, interest in natural science is reborn in the Renaissance. This is observed in arts, which began to become a faithful representation of nature. The laws of perspective were created, and the geometrized space that enable depth representation also enable the development of classical mechanics. Back to planetary systems, in the 16th century, the astronomer Nicholas Copernicus proposed the heliocentric model, but it still took a century before the replacement of the geocentrism. Giordano Bruno was condemned to burn to death for teaching heliocentrism. Galileo Galilei observed the sky with a telescope and presented evidence that the Earth orbits around the Sun. Nevertheless, the evidences brought by Galileo was not enough to convince the ecclesiastical authorities. He was forced to recant, so he would not have the same fate as Giordano Bruno. But at that time, geocentrism was a dying theory. The final blow was delivered by Johannes Kepler when he described the laws of planets' orbits. From Kepler's third law, Isaac Newton was able to decipher universal law of gravitation, explaining why celestial bodies orbit the most massive ones, just as Aristarchus has envisioned 2000 years before. After the contributions of Isaac Newton, science evolved in great leaps, and history entered the industrial era. Science understood energy transformations, and this knowledge is called thermodynamics. Soon, electricity was mastered. In the second half of the 19th century, James Clerk Maxwell published the laws of electromagnetism, and this was the culmination of centuries of studies and investigations into the nature of matter. One step further, the quantum universe was about to be unveiled, thanks to the contributions of scientists like J.J. Thomson, Max Planck, and Albert Einstein. The advent of quantum physics shook the structures of classical physics and the way science views reality. In fact, we are still in the process of becoming aware of quantum reality. Understanding nature and understanding human mind are two aspects of consciousness evolution. Philosophy may have begun with the saying, "Know yourself, and the mysteries of the gods and the universe will be revealed to you." Many centuries have passed, and today the structures of the universe are being investigated in such depth that never before in its history. I believe we are on the brink on a revolution of consciousness. Due to the challenges we face as a species, whose own activities have caused major environmental problems, to evolve or to become extinct. Here's the deal every species makes with nature. Certainly, for us humans today, evolve means to live in harmony with our home planet, and not be biological, but in consciousness. Begins with individual awareness becoming collective. The next stage of human evolution may be a globally enlightened species. And here I end my presentation on the development of human consciousness so far from my point of view. As a teacher, I'm on a mission to promote an interdisciplinary teaching in which we seek to develop our intellectual abilities through artistic activities. If you want to know more about it, watch the other videos and stay with us to the next. See you there!